The room was silent, but inside Keanu's heart, a storm was roaring. He stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker far below. Years had passed since he last saw Charlize, but the memory of her smile had never left him. Sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, her laughter still echoed in his mind. He wondered if she ever thought of him, too. That evening, he had received an unexpected message. It was short, almost hesitant, written in simple words, but those words had the power to shake his world. "Can we meet?" Keanu's fingers had trembled when he read it. For a long time, he just stared at the screen, unsure if it was real. Charlize was someone he had once held close, someone he respected deeply, someone he had let slip away because life had pulled them in different directions. But now, the chance to see her again stood before him, and it filled him with both fear and hope. As he drove to the quiet cafe where they had agreed to meet, his thoughts raced. Would she still be the same? Would she even want to see him? His heart carried scars, and he knew hers did too. Life had not been easy for either of them. Yet the thought of her sitting across from him again made him feel something he hadn't felt in years: nervous excitement. When Keanu walked into the cafe, the smell of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around him, but what caught his eyes was her. Charlize sat by the window, her face soft in the warm golden light. She looked up as he entered, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Her eyes widened slightly, not in shock, but in recognition. A gentle reminder that even after years, some connections never fade. Their first words were hesitant, almost fragile. "Hi, Charlize." Keanu's voice carried both relief and doubt. "Hi, Keanu," she replied, her smile small but real. They spoke about ordinary things at first: the city, work, old friends. But beneath their words was a heavy silence, filled with everything they hadn't said for years. Every pause carried memories of laughter and tears, of moments once shared but left unfinished. Then came the moment that changed everything. As Keanu reached for his cup, his hand brushed against hers on the table. It was an accident, but neither of them pulled away. Instead, they let the touch linger, as if their hearts had been waiting for it all along. Charlize's eyes glistened as she whispered, "I thought we lost this forever." Keanu's throat tightened. So did I, but maybe some things are meant to find their way back. In that small cafe, two souls scarred by time began to heal. Their laughter slowly returned. Their smiles grew brighter. And when Charlize reached across the table to hold his hand, Keanu felt a warmth he had almost forgotten existed. It was as if the years apart had been leading to this single moment of reunion. Outside, the city continued with its noise and rush, but inside, they sat still, two people rediscovering the power of kindness, respect, and love. This was only the beginning, but it was enough to remind them both that happiness, once lost, could return when least expected. The night after their meeting, Keanu could not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the memory of Charlize's hand still lingering in his. He felt the warmth as if it were still there, alive against his skin. It had been years since such a simple touch carried so much weight. But with that warmth came questions he could not ignore. What if she only wanted closure? What if their paths were never meant to meet again? He turned on his side, the city lights glowing faintly through his curtains. In his chest, hope wrestled with fear. He remembered the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the way her laughter, though cautious, slipped out like a forgotten melody, returning. Yet he also remembered the sadness buried in her words. Something about her that night felt heavy, as if she was carrying a secret she had not yet shared. The next day, Keanu stood by his kitchen counter, sipping black coffee, when his phone buzzed. It was her. "Thank you for yesterday. I wasn't sure I could face it, but I'm glad I did. Would you like to meet again?" His heart skipped. The message was gentle but layered, almost as if she was testing if he truly wanted to be there. Without hesitation, he replied, "Yes, anytime, anywhere." That evening, they met at a small park on the edge of the city. The place was quiet, with old oak trees bending under the weight of years. They walked side by side along the path, their steps slow, their silence more comfortable this time. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Charlize asked softly, her voice almost lost in the sound of the leaves brushing together. Keanu glanced at her. Every day. She gave a faint smile, but her eyes betrayed a depth of pain. Me too. I used to think we made the right choice, letting go, moving forward. But sometimes the heart doesn't understand what the mind decides. Her honesty struck him. Keanu stopped walking, turning to face her. Charlize, what really brought you back to me? Was it just curiosity, or is there something more? She hesitated. Her eyes fell to the ground, her hand tightening around the strap of her bag. I've been through things, Keanu. Things I never told you. And lately, I've realized I can't keep carrying them alone. The weight of her words pressed into him. He wanted to ask, to pull the truth out of her, but something inside told him not to rush. Instead, he nodded slowly. You don't have to tell me now, but when you're ready, I'll listen. I'll be here. For a moment, her eyes filled with gratitude, and then, like a sudden break in the clouds, she reached for his hand again. This time it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, steady, filled with need and trust. As they sat together on a wooden bench under the oak tree, a hush settled around them. The world outside moved with noise and chaos, but in that moment, they were in their own world, wrapped in a silence that healed more than words could. Charlize broke it softly. Keanu, do you ever wonder why life brings some people back to us after years apart? He thought for a long moment. Maybe because we weren't finished. Maybe because what we had wasn't meant to end. It was just paused. Her lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes still carried that hidden storm. As night approached and the park lamps lit up one by one, Charlize stood slowly, her hand still linked with his. I want to keep meeting, but promise me something. Anything, he said. Don't give up when it gets hard, because it will. I'm not the same person you knew before. His voice was steady. Neither am I. But maybe that's what makes this the right time. They walked away together, their hands still joined. But in both of their hearts was an unspoken truth. Something deeper, more complicated, was waiting just beyond this fragile happiness. Keanu didn't know it yet, but her secret would test every part of him, his patience, his kindness, his resilience. And Charlize didn't know it yet, but his steady presence would be the light she had been missing in the darkest corners of her life. Their reunion was no accident. It was the beginning of a storm they would have to face together, a storm that could either break them apart forever or teach them the true meaning of love, humility, and strength. And as the night air grew colder, their hands remained warm in each other's, unaware that this fragile bond would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. Keanu woke up with a heaviness in his chest the next morning, but it wasn't the kind of heaviness that pulled him down. It was the weight of something unfinished, something waiting to unfold. The night at the park with Charlize replayed in his mind again and again. Her words, her eyes, the way her hand had clung to his like she was holding on to more than just comfort. It was as if she was holding on to life itself. The sunlight poured through his curtains, but instead of making him feel calm, it filled him with restlessness. He walked through his apartment slowly, pacing, sipping his coffee without tasting it. He could not ignore what she had said. Don't give up when it gets hard. Because it will. Why had she said that? What darkness was she carrying? Keanu had always been known for his patience, his humility, his quiet strength. But for the first time in years, he felt a fire inside him. The kind of fire that came when someone you cared about was on the edge, and you knew you had to be there to pull them back. Later that day, his phone rang. It was her again. He answered quickly, his voice softer than usual.
Charlize?
Her tone was calm, but beneath it he sensed unease. Can you come with me somewhere today? There's something I want to show you. Without a second thought, he agreed. They met outside an old gallery on the quieter side of the city. The building was weathered, its brick walls carrying stories of time. Charlize stood by the entrance, wearing a simple coat, her hair falling freely around her shoulders. Her face lit up the moment she saw him, but her eyes, those eyes still held the same quiet storm. Inside, the gallery was nearly empty. The walls were filled with paintings, colors of chaos, splashes of grief, fragments of beauty stitched with pain. Charlize walked him through the silent hall until they stopped in front of a large canvas. It was dark, painted with shadows, but in the center was a single streak of light breaking through. She stood there, staring at it for a long time before whispering, "This one is mine." Keanu blinked. "You painted this?" She nodded slowly. "Years ago, when I was trying to hold myself together. I never showed it to anyone. Until now." He studied the canvas again, and suddenly he understood. It wasn't just art, it was a confession. The painting carried the weight of someone who had fought against darkness, someone who had been alone with their pain. Charlize's voice trembled as she continued. "I've been through times when I thought I'd never come back. I lost parts of myself I thought were gone forever. This painting, it was the only way I knew how to breathe." Keanu turned to her, his eyes steady, filled with empathy. "Charlize, you don't have to carry this alone anymore, not now, not with me here." She looked at him, her lips parting as if to respond, but instead tears filled her eyes. They weren't loud tears. They were silent, the kind that spoke louder than words. And in that moment, Keanu did not speak either. He simply stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her. For a long time, she let herself lean into him, her forehead resting against his chest. It was the kind of embrace that didn't promise easy answers but promised presence. And sometimes presence was all a person needed to keep walking forward. When she finally pulled back, her hands lingered on his arms. "Keanu, I don't know if I'm ready to tell you everything yet, but I needed you to see this part of me first. The broken part." His reply was simple but filled with conviction. Sometimes broken parts are the most beautiful, because they show we survived. They left the gallery together, the weight between them heavier but also more honest. Outside, the evening sun painted the streets in gold, and for a brief moment, Charlize allowed herself to smile. Not the guarded smile she had worn before, but one that carried a spark of real hope. As they walked down the quiet street, Keanu noticed the way people glanced at her. Even in her silence, she carried a grace that drew eyes, but he could see how unaware she was of it. To him, her strength was not in how she looked, but in how she still stood tall despite all she had endured. "There's something I want to ask you," Keanu said as they reached the corner. She raised her brow slightly. "What is it?" "Let's not run from this," he said firmly. "Whatever is waiting in the shadows, whatever truth you haven't said yet, let me face it with you." "Don't shut me out." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, "You might regret saying that, Keanu, because once I tell you, everything changes." His voice was steady. "Then let it change. Because the only thing I'd regret is not trying." For the first time since they met again, her smile reached her eyes, though it was faint. "You really haven't changed, have you?" "I have," he replied softly, "but not the parts that matter." As the night settled over the city, they walked together again. But this time, their silence wasn't filled with distance. It was filled with anticipation. Both of them knew that the truth Charlize carried would not wait forever. It was coming, and when it did, it would test not only their bond, but also their resilience, their humility, and their strength. Keanu felt it in his bones. The storm was near, but for the first time in years, he was not afraid, because he wasn't walking alone. The following days moved slowly, but inside Keanu, everything moved fast. Every glance from Charlize, every pause in her words, every hidden silence pulled him deeper into a world he wanted to understand. He was certain now she was carrying something heavier than she let on. He tried to be patient. He tried to remind himself that sometimes broken hearts needed time. But one evening, as the rain fell lightly against the city streets, she called him with a voice that shook. "Keanu, can you come over?" There was no hesitation in his answer. "I'll be there." Her apartment was warm, lit only by a single lamp. The sound of rain against the windows filled the space. But inside, the air was thick with tension. Charlize sat on the edge of her couch, her hands clasped tightly together, as if she was holding herself from falling apart. When Keanu stepped in, she looked up at him, and in that instant, He saw it, the storm she had been hiding. "Charlize," he began, but she shook her head. "Please just sit. I need to tell you something." He obeyed, sitting across from her, his eyes steady, his presence calm. For a long time, she said nothing. Her fingers trembled, her breath uneven. Then, finally, her voice broke the silence. "I wasn't just painting to escape," she whispered. "I was painting because I was losing myself. I went through nights where I thought I wouldn't see the morning. I battled with my mind, with the emptiness that followed me everywhere. I shut people out. I pushed away anyone who tried to help, and I told myself I didn't deserve to be loved." Her words hung heavy in the air. Keanu's heart clenched, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let her unravel, and then she paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I lost someone very close to me. I couldn't forgive myself. I thought if I had been stronger, if I had been braver, maybe they would still be here. And that guilt, it almost destroyed me." Her hands covered her face, her voice breaking. "Keanu, I don't want to hide anymore, but I'm scared. Because the moment I open this door, I can't close it again." Keanu leaned forward, his voice gentle but unwavering. "Charlize, you don't have to carry this alone. You don't have to keep fighting the storm by yourself. I can't change the past for you, but I can walk through the pain with you. I can hold your hand through the nights when it feels impossible." Her hands lowered, her tear-filled eyes meeting his. "But what if I drag you down with me?" He shook his head slowly. "You won't. Because you're not a weight, Charlize. You're how bright it is yet." She broke then, not in weakness, but in surrender. She leaned into him, her body trembling, and for the first time she allowed herself to cry freely in his arms. Keanu held her without words, his arms strong but gentle, his presence unshakable. Minutes passed like hours, the rain outside softening, the storm inside her finally spilling out. When she lifted her head, there was a rawness in her eyes, but also a spark, like the first flame of a candle lit after darkness. "Keanu," she whispered, "why are you still here? Why haven't you walked away like everyone else?" His answer was quiet, but it carried the weight of truth. "Because walking away was the biggest mistake I made once. I won't make it again." Her lips parted as if words had failed her, and in that silence she reached for his hand, squeezing it as if it was the only anchor she had left. They sat there, not as two people who had everything figured out, but as two souls who had chosen not to give up on each other. But even as the rain stopped and the night grew calm, Keanu felt it. The story wasn't over. There were still layers of her truth waiting to come out, and he knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be moments when she would want to retreat, when her fear would fight against her hope. But he also knew one thing for certain. He was ready to stay, no matter how long the storm lasted. When he left her apartment that night, the streets were still wet, the lamps reflecting against the puddles. He walked slowly, his heart heavy but determined. He whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "I won't let her face this alone." Yet somewhere deep inside, another thought echoed. What if her pain was tied to something bigger than he imagined? What if the truth she hadn't spoken yet would change everything about the life they were rebuilding? For now he chose not to fear it. For now he chose to hold on to the memory of her tears against his chest, and the fragile but real hope that had begun to return to her eyes. But the unspoken question lingered like a shadow in the distance. Was love strong enough to survive the secrets still hidden? The following morning, Keanu sat by his window with a quiet heaviness inside him. He had always been a man of silence, someone who carried his pain with dignity and never allowed the world to see the storms inside. But now, with Charlize's words still echoing in his mind, his silence felt different. It was not just his burden anymore. It was theirs. He thought about the way her voice had cracked, the way her hands had trembled as she revealed the pieces of her truth. He thought about her fear, the fear that she might drag him into her darkness. But what she didn't know was that Keanu had already faced his own shadows. He knew what it was like to lose, to break, to fall apart, and slowly piece yourself back together. Perhaps that was why he felt so certain. He was meant to walk this path with her. Later that day, she asked him to meet her again. This time, Not in a cafe, not in a park, not in the safety of four walls, but in a place that carried memories. When he arrived, Charlize was standing outside an old theater, one that had been closed for years. Its posters had faded, its lights no longer shone, but it carried a history between them. Years ago, they had both stood on that very stage for a small charity event, laughing together as they entertained a crowd. It was the night their friendship had first felt like something more, the night their hands had brushed for the first time in front of hundreds of strangers. Yet the world around them had disappeared. She looked at the building as if it held her soul. "I haven't been back here since that night," she whispered. "It feels like everything ended after this." Keanu studied her carefully. "Why bring me here now?" She hesitated before replying. "Because I need you to see where my story broke apart." Together they stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and time, the rows of seats silent and empty. The stage stood waiting, its wooden floor creaking under their steps. Charlize walked slowly to the center, her figure small against the vast emptiness. "After that night, I felt something," she said, her voice trembling. "Something I was too afraid to name. I wanted to believe in it, but life kept pulling me in different directions. And when I tried to hold on to it, everything else around me started to fall apart." She turned to face him, her eyes raw and unguarded. "Keanu, I didn't just lose someone close to me. I lost myself in ways I can't fully explain. I made choices that hurt me and choices that hurt others. I built walls because it felt safer than being left behind." Her confession was heavy, but Keanu didn't look away. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Charlize, we all carry regrets. But standing here right now, I don't see someone broken. I see someone brave enough to face the pain instead of hiding from it." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "But what if I can't ever be enough? What if I let you down again?" His reply came without hesitation. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. And that's already enough." For a long moment, she stood frozen. Then, as if something inside her gave way, she closed the space between them and reached for his hand. Standing together on that stage, where their story had first begun, they held hands once again, not as two actors caught in a moment, but as two souls trying to write a new chapter. The silence of the theater wrapped around them. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the sound of hope returning, fragile but alive. Keanu squeezed her hand gently. "This place isn't where things ended. Maybe it's where they're starting again." Charlize let out a shaky breath, and for the first time in a long time, a smile touched her lips. "Maybe you're right, but just as the moment felt light, just as the shadows seemed to fade, her expression shifted. Her smile faltered and her eyes grew distant. "There's something else," she whispered. "Something I haven't told you. The guilt I carry isn't just about the past. It's about something that could still affect us. Something I've been running from for years." Keanu's chest tightened. "Charlize, whatever it is, say it. Don't carry it alone anymore." Her voice broke as she finally admitted, "Someone from my past, someone I thought was gone. They've come back, and they're not just a memory. They're a storm waiting to destroy whatever we're building here." Her words cut through the silence like lightning. Keanu stood still, processing them, the weight of her revelation pressing heavily into the air. He didn't know who this person was yet, or what kind of power they held over her. But one thing was clear. The piece they had just begun to rebuild was about to be tested in ways neither of them expected. Charlize gripped his hand tighter, fear flickering in her eyes. "I don't want to lose this again, Keanu. I don't want to lose you." He stepped closer, his voice low but unwavering. "Then you won't. Because no matter what storm is coming, I'll be here. And this time, I won't let go." The empty theater seemed to breathe around them, the stage once filled with laughter now echoing with the weight of truth. Their hands remained joined, but both of them knew the road ahead would be far from easy. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, as if the world itself was warning them that the storm had only just begun. The storm came sooner than Keanu expected. Days after their meeting in the theater, Charlize grew quieter. She answered his calls. She met him when he asked, but he noticed the fear that never left her eyes. She was waiting for something she hoped wouldn't come, but deep down, She knew it would. One evening, she finally told him everything. They sat together in her living room, the lights dim, the night outside heavy with silence. "The person I told you about," Charlize whispered, her voice unsteady. "His name is Daniel. Years ago, I trusted him. He was part of my life when I was at my weakest. But he wasn't what he seemed. He manipulated me, controlled me, and when I finally broke free, I thought it was over. But he came back, and he wants to destroy anything good I try to build." Keanu's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Has he contacted you?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "A letter. No threats, no shouting. Just a message. You'll never escape me." Keanu leaned forward, his eyes steady, his tone filled with quiet strength. "Then he hasn't met me yet. Because this time, you're not alone." She looked at him, her face torn between hope and fear. "Keanu, I don't want you caught in this. You've already carried so much pain in your own life. I can't let you take mine, too." He shook his head. "Charlize, love isn't about protecting someone from your darkness. It's about standing with them inside it. If you think I'll step away, you don't know me at all." The days that followed tested that promise. Daniel's presence wasn't loud, but it was constant. Strange calls, anonymous letters, shadows that followed her on the street. Charlize grew restless, her sleep broken, her laughter fading again. But through it all, Keanu never left her side. He walked with her, he listened to her, and when fear tried to take over, he reminded her with quiet words, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The breaking point came one night when Daniel showed up at her building. Charlize froze when she saw him through the window. A figure from her past, tall, cold, his presence heavy with the weight of control. Fear gripped her, but before she could fall apart, Keanu stepped in front of her. His voice was low, steady, almost calm. "You don't belong here?" Daniel smirked, his tone sharp. "She belongs to me. She always has." Keanu's eyes didn't waver. "No, she doesn't, and she never will. She belongs to herself, and she's stronger than you think." For a moment, the tension filled the room like a storm ready to break. Charlize's hand clung to Keanu's arm, her heart racing. Daniel's gaze shifted between them, and for the first time, he saw it. The strength in their unity, the resilience that came not from anger, but from love. "You can't protect her forever," Daniel sneered. "Maybe not," Keanu replied quietly. "But I'll protect her as long as I breathe." "And that's more than enough?" The silence stretched. Daniel's smirk faded, and finally, without another word, he turned and walked away. Charlize collapsed into Keanu's arms, her tears falling freely. "I thought he would never stop haunting me," she whispered. Keanu stroked her hair gently. "He doesn't get to write your story anymore. You do. And I'll be here for every chapter." The days that followed were not perfect. There were still moments of fear, still shadows that lingered in Charlize's mind. But the difference now was that she was no longer alone. Keanu stood beside her, patient, steady, reminding her of the strength she had always carried. Slowly, her laughter returned. Slowly, her eyes began to shine again. Weeks later, they returned to the old theater. This time, the doors were open for a small community event. The stage lights glowed once more. Not bright, but enough to remind them of what they had once shared. Hand in hand, they stepped onto the stage again. Charlize looked around, her smile soft, but real. "I used to think this was where everything ended," she said. "But now I see, it was only the beginning." Keanu squeezed her hand. "Some stories need time. Some hearts need storms to find their way back." She turned to him, her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. "Thank you for not letting go," he smiled faintly. "Thank you for holding on." As the audience clapped for the simple performance on stage, Keanu and Charlize stood in the background, their hands joined, their hearts steady. Happiness had not come easily. It had been tested, broken, rebuilt. But in the end, it had returned, stronger, purer, and filled with the resilience of two souls who refused to give up on each other. And so, when Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron held hands again, they knew this time it wasn't just a gesture. It was a promise. A promise that no storm, no shadow, no past could ever take away the happiness they had finally found together.